What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. It's Thursday, so time for another player breakdown. I was going to do the second round running back breakdown, but I'm a man of the people. So you guys voted for a different one by a pretty wide margin. So today we're going to do Hall versus Etienne versus Akers, and then we'll do the second round one probably next week, and that's going to be Aaron Jones versus Saquon versus Leonard Fournette. But for this week, a bit of a unique breakdown. Not only do we have a rookie in Breece Hall, I don't know how many rookies we've done in these breakdown videos, but if we've done any, it hasn't been very many. We've got basically a rookie in Etienne. We kind of have to treat him like a rookie because he didn't play at all last season. And then Akers, someone going into his third season, but was forced to miss, the entire second year, or effectively his entire second year, with the torn Achilles. So we've got a rookie, a year 2 player, and a year 3 player, but only like one season of production that we can look at. So a lot of projecting that has to go into these players, but that's why we need to break it down, because all three of them are a little bit difficult to fully get a grasp on. And so when you're trying to rank all of them, it can become very difficult. So we'll go in reverse order of draft, I guess. I don't know. We're going with the oldest first, basically, in terms of years played. And so we're going to go Akers, then Etienne, then Breece Hall for the breakdown. So starting off with Akers. He was a mid-second round pick back in 2020. He was the 4th running back off the board behind Clyde, then Swift, then Jonathan Taylor. He had, extremely high college target share, a 91st percentile college dominator rating at Florida State. He was really, really, really good in college. He was then used as a part-time player initially as a rookie, which, is common for, most rookie running backs. They don't come out there and just dominate touches from the start. It happens. Najee Harris last season was a great example of someone we knew was going to get a billion touches right out of the gates. Didn't exactly happen that way for Cam Akers. He wasn't really used as a featured running back until week 13. Through week 12, he never played more than 33% of the snaps, and he averaged 7 carries and 0.4 targets per game. Didn't do a whole lot. Then, in the 6 games after week 12, so from week 13 on, he played less than 63% of the snaps exactly 0 times, averaged 22 carries per game, 2.3 targets per game, so still not like prolific in the receiving game, and he scored 3 touchdowns in 6 weeks. So it was a really, really nice end to his rookie season, and everyone was really excited about him going into year 2, especially given how good we thought the Rams were going to be, because they weren't as good, of course, in that first season. Well, last year we were expecting them to be really good. I don't think anyone was projecting them to win the Super Bowl, but we knew they were going to be a very, very good offense. We knew they'd be an improved offense. So we were very excited about Akers. Then unfortunately, he tears his Achilles, which is, I don't want to say worse than a torn ACL, but it's right up there. It is one of the worst injuries you could possibly have, especially as a running back, because it takes away a lot of your burst. We know historically that under 25 is a really good cutoff for ACL tears. Really, we don't have any history for Achilles tears, which we'll get to. But when running backs suffer these major injuries, and even wide receivers under the age of 25, we usually expect them to still return. So we knew he'd come back at some point. But nobody expected him to return by the end of the season. ACL tears, Achilles tears, you're done. As soon as you hear that, no one ever returns at the end of the season. It's 9 months is typical for an Achilles tear, and then even then you're not going to be 100%. But somehow he returns 5 months later, and he plays 13 snaps in week 18, 40 snaps per game, and there are 4 playoff games. And in those games, he averaged 17 carries, 2.5 targets per game, didn't score a touchdown. Unfortunately, he only averaged 2.57 yards per carry, lost 2 fumbles against the Bucs, and nearly cost them their season in that game. So it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? It wasn't like he returned, he's averaging 5 yards per carry, and he was some monster. And this is the part I struggle with, and the part that I think most people in general are going to struggle with. Would we be viewing Akers in a better light had he not returned last season? Which is ridiculous to think that if he hadn't come back in record-breaking speed from a catastrophic injury, we'd be viewing him better than now. But I think everyone just looks at that yards per carry and it's like, oh, he stinks now, or oh, we don't know if he's gonna be any good. Whereas maybe we wouldn't be questioning it as much had he not returned, which again feels very unfair and it feels wrong. Like, again, he returned to an NFL game 5 months after tearing his Achilles, despite it having a 9-month recovery timeline. And the fact that pretty much no running back has ever returned to their old self, even given like years to recover. I mean, he returned 4 months early from a massive injury thrown right into the playoffs. And we're sitting here attacking him, even though, it was incredible for him to even sniff the field. And the fact that 2 of those games in the playoffs were against elite run defenses. So that's how I'm kind of looking at it. And like he's a 23-year-old running back. He's now 100% recovered from a major injury. The Rams have proven a willingness to use him as a featured running back, not necessarily heavily in the receiving game, though there has been talk this offseason about getting him more involved in the receiving game. It's just talk until we like really see it in camp. But it's at least worth noting that like he is still 23 years old entering his 3rd season and he looks to be 100% healthy. I don't want to hold the injury against him and say that he's definitely like bad now. Like if he was 30 years old, maybe we could start saying that. He's 23. He faces some level of competition with Henderson, with Kyron Williams once he recovers. I believe he'll be good to go to start the season, but he's got the broken foot right now. But like, how much competition is that really? Like Henderson has been largely disappointing thus far in his career. They spent a 2nd rounder on Akers after already having Henderson, so they clearly wanted someone else. Like I think Henderson could threaten his workload in the receiving game and get some on the ground, but it seems pretty clear that, I mean, they were giving Akers touches when he was coming off a catastrophic injury and clearly wasn't 100% because they like this kid and they want him being featured in this offense. My current projection for this backfield has it as a 60-30-10 split between Akers, Henderson, and Williams in terms of carries, and then a little bit more of the targets going to Henderson and Williams, 45-39, 16% split in the receiving game. Now, I'd say that there's definitely guesswork in that split because we've got a rookie in there. We've got Akers having only 1 full season. Like we haven't just seen this group all together. But again, that's the case for all of these running backs. And so you just have to do some level of projecting, and we're going to learn a lot more in August so we can get, a lot more confident in that projection then. So that's it for Akers. Let's move on to Etienne. So Etienne was selected 25th overall last season and was the 2nd running back off the board, 1 pick behind Najee Harris. Etienne isn't a running back that you're ever going to like expect, 25, 27 carries per game. That's not what he is, but that's completely fine because he's going to more than make up for that in the receiving game. We know that targets are more valuable than carries. He was highly prolific as a pass catcher in college, and the Jaguars have been very clear with their intentions to use him in that area this season. Now, this backfield is pretty interesting because both running backs are coming off major injuries. Like you don't typically see that. Etienne has the Liz Frank surgery before even seeing a snap last season, fully recovered from that now. Robinson tore his Achilles in late December, still working back from that. Etienne was reported like 85-90% back in April. He was a full go in OTAs. Like he has no limitations at this point. He's good to go. He looks really good if you look at some of the workouts he's been doing. He looks healthy. Robinson, on the other hand, like we don't really have a timetable for him. It seems like he's not going to be fully healthy, not going to be out there in like mid to late July once camps open. But the reports right now seem to say that like he's going to be good to go in week 1. Will that be 100%? Tough to say. I mean, if he's not really back until August, it's tough for him to be 100%, come early September when games start. But pretty early in the season, we're still expecting Robinson to return. But it's another situation where it's a torn Achilles, and we don't 100% know what he's going to look like. In terms of confidence between Akers and Etienne returning to their old self, I have more faith in Etienne. We have seen a bunch of players return from Liz Frank surgery and have elite seasons. I'm not concerned at all. He had a very long time to recover. He's going to be fine. The same really can't be said for Achilles injuries, though it is very worth noting that the sample size is tiny, and many of the running backs in the sample size for torn Achilles returning were terrible running backs anyways. And so if you point to them and be like, oh, they weren't good when they returned, it's like, well, they weren't good when they were hurt. Other running backs that used to be good were old when they tore their Achilles. So it's like there's such a small sample size that it's very unfair to be like, oh, Achilles tear can't be good. maybe in like 40 years when we have a much larger sample, we can kind of have a better analysis on that. But the sample's not large enough for elite running backs to where we can say like they're definitely not going to be good. But again, with that being said, we have a large sample for Liz Frank's surgery, or a good enough sample at least. I wouldn't say anything is really large in the NFL, but a good enough sample to know Etienne's going to be fine. He's going to be totally fine unless he suffers like a different injury. I'm not worried about it. So I'm more confident in Etienne than Akers, but that's really just because I'm supremely confident in Etienne. In terms of what we should expect, it is pretty tough to know. And talking about Etienne now, I think that Robinson is going to return, and I think he's going to get a good amount of workload. Like James Robinson's a really, really good running back. They're not just going to not use him and feature Etienne. Even the largest Etienne supporters do not think he's going to be a featured running back. Everyone knows Robinson will be using the ground. Everyone knows that Robinson's also good in the receiving game, so he's going to take some of those snaps, some of those targets away as well. But the calling card for Etienne is that he could push for 80 receptions, and he's talked about really wanting to be used like Deebo Samuel. Obviously, we saw how good he was in fantasy, and it would have been even more impressive if you got to play him as a running back. Now, obviously, the 49ers are a better offense than the Jaguars, but I think the Jaguars are going to be way better this season. They no longer have horrendous coaching in Urban Meyer. They have the second season with Trevor Lawrence, who I still believe in. They have better skill players. They're going to be fine this season. I think they're going to surprise you with how good they are. And so I wouldn't say that you just can't have a really high-end season on the Jaguars. Still have a lot of confidence in Etienne, again, even though we know he's not going to have a ton of work on the ground. So I currently have the projected split 60-40 in rushing in favor of Etienne, but it's the receiving split that, things really separate. 80-20 split in the receiving game in favor of Etienne. Again, a lot of this projection does come down to Robinson's health, but until we see him return, look good, I think these splits make, a lot of sense. That we think Etienne will be getting more total work if it comes out, early July that James Robinson looks really good, going to be used a ton. Maybe we can change that. But I think regardless, the receiving split is going to be there. They're going to use Etienne a lot in the receiving game, and that's what we want in fantasy. That brings us to Breece Hall. Before we circle back, do a final ranking. Hall is really the only running back in this group that is not coming off of a major injury, but he is a rookie, and so we still have a lot of guesswork as far as his production is concerned. Hall was highly prolific in college, 80th percentile college target share, 95th percentile college dominator rating on the back of 56 touchdowns in 3 years, 98th percentile speed score, and was ultimately the first running back selected this season, 4th pick in the second round. Really, really, really good prospect. Now, I was a Michael Carter stan last season, and I do think that Carter's a good running back, but he's objectively worse than Breece Hall in every area of the game, and that's going to be evident when people watch the Jets this season. It might not happen right away, but Hall is likely going to be featured by the end of the season, and if he's not, it'll be incredibly close. So even if we can't call him a featured running back, we're going to be able to look at it and say he's getting so much work where he is effectively a featured running back. His biggest threat is not Michael Carter, actually. It's Zach Wilson. The Jets are ranked 23rd in touchdowns per game last season, 20th in red zone touchdown percentage, 25th in rushing yards per game. And if we're being honest, those numbers would have been worse if Wilson hadn't gotten hurt for a few weeks. He had a truly awful rookie season, and he really held this offense back at times. Now, to be fair, wasn't all him. There were a lot of injuries. His supporting cast before the injuries wasn't all that great. This season, he's going to have Elijah Moore, Garrett Wilson, Corey Davis, Hall, Conklin, Uzoma, a significant upgrade in skill players from last season. So in his second year, I do expect him to be a lot better, and I expect these numbers to improve, but we need him to be good. We need him to not have a terrible season again, look horrible, because if he does, that's going to impact the running backs. You can only be so good of a running back when your team is putrid. And if Zach Wilson plays like he did last year, they're not going to be good. Ultimately, I think I have a conservative projection for the Jets backfield right now. I'm still giving it a 70-30 split in favor of Breece Hall, 60-40 split in targets in favor of him. I do think that there is a chance that we see a full 80-20 split in favor of Hall this season, but I wouldn't say I'm 100% confident in that, and so I want to dial it back, make it 70-30 for rushing, 40-60 for, I guess, 60-40. Everything in favor still of Hall. And I think that that's like a very, very fair projection. Now, how do these projections work out when you combine them among all three running backs? As you can see on the screen now, and as I'll read to you if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it depends on the scoring format that you're in. Etienne is significantly better in full PPR formats than he is in standard scoring formats because of the reasons I mentioned. His calling card is the receptions. I mean, you take away points for every reception, obviously he's going to be less valuable. In standard, Akers is the winner by like a good chunk, then Hall in second, then Etienne in third. In half PPR, it is much closer among everyone. Akers still holds a decent lead, followed by Etienne, then Breece Hall. And then in PPR, it is actually Etienne taking the lead on the back of 74 projected receptions, followed by Akers, then Hall in last. That is why it is very important to always use the correct rankings because different scoring formats favor different types of players. Etienne is a phenomenal pick in full PPR, but in standard, which is heavily leaning towards rushing production, rushing touchdowns, he's not as great of a pick. And that's why you also always need to stay up to date with the latest rankings because we're going to learn a lot in July, in late August, and that extra information is going to make the projections more and more accurate. Like, I could simply gain more confidence in Hall's workload, push that split to 80-20, and then maybe he's ranked first among these guys in August. But if you're not following the rankings, then you won't know that. So please stay up to date with those on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. I'll be back tomorrow. Biggest bust in every round, Saturday, to go over the biggest ADP changes of the last week. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.